All right, welcome to our third study strategy, which is to use practice tests, represented here by the fishing pole, going to retrieve some memories from the brain as a way of improving our learning or understanding of that information. So let's get into it. Restudying, rereading, rewriting our notes typically doesn't help our learning very much. Evidence shows it's usually a very inefficient and effective study strategy. But taking practice tests improves our learning quite a bit, or practice retrieving information from our memories is actually really useful. It makes retrieving that information easier in the future. So in order to be able to retrieve that information, we need to practice retrieving that information. Here's examples of research evidence showing the benefits of practice tests and practice recall. This first one's in an undergraduate stats course, where one group of learners practiced recall, where at the end of each lecture, they just wrote down everything they could remember from that lecture, and the other group just left. They went along with their normal everyday schedule. The final test was this complex stats test. What we find is even on this exam performance, those that practice recall got 86% correct, while those that didn't practice recall only got 78% correct. In other words, practicing recall boosted exam performance by a full letter grade here. Another example comes from fifth graders who are learning complex definitions like what is a convex lens. So everyone studied these definitions. Then they either restudied and reread them, or they took a practice test on them, either with feedback of the correct answer or not. And then everyone took a final test 4 weeks later. So how did we do? Those that took a practice test, the blue bars, did significantly better on that final test than those that restudied. We're talking 7-8 percentage points, regardless of whether feedback is provided or not. Further, it doesn't matter if it's science or geography, those that take practice tests remember much more than those that just restudy or reread. Again, once again, showing the benefits or the importance of practice retrieving the information from memory. All right, let's talk about a couple more examples of the benefits of practice tests compared to other study techniques. Here, we're going to compare practice tests to concept maps, where you create the different ideas and connect them in your mind where they are connected. So this study refers to undergraduates learning about sea otters. One group that does concept mapping, where they study it once and make a concept map while they're viewing the text, compared to a retrieval practice group, those that study once, put it away, and try to retrieve and recall as much as they can, study it again, put it away, retrieve, and recall as much as they can. What we see, doesn't matter how we test it, the group that has practice retrieval does much better than the group that has created a concept map. So we're seeing about 15 to 20 percentage points better performance on these tests when you are engaged in retrieval practice compared to other study techniques. We can compare it to even more study techniques like studying once, studying it 4 times, and creating the concept map and retrieval practice. So we can look at verbatim questions, which are facts or ideas that appeared in the text. Retrieval practice does much better than any other study condition there. We can look at it in terms of inference questions, where these are not ideas that were explicitly addressed in the reading, but learners are applying or transferring their knowledge to new settings. We can also look at an example from 7th graders that are learning the different parts of a flower. So one group is going to study it once. The other groups are going to hide the names and try to retrieve or recall the names. What we find when we do that is just by studying it, we're getting about 20% correct. If we take one practice test, we double that proportion correct on the final test. If we test ourselves twice, we get up to 80% correct. So the more times that we are testing ourselves and the more times that we are practicing retrieval, the better we are going to do on that final test. Speaks to the importance of practicing retrieval. All right, so how can we use retrieval practice to improve our grades in Chem 151? Lots of different ways. Anything that involves practice retrieving it from memory rather than rereading it or restudying it is going to be useful. So things like creating our own questions and then trying to answer them from memory. A brain dump where we write down anything we can remember from a reading or a lecture, just trying to retrieve as much information and practice retrieving that as we can. Flashcards are useful for retrieval practice as long as we are actively trying to recall the answer before just looking at it. But lots of other ways. As long as we are retrieving that information from memory, we can create a graphic organizer from memory. We can draw a process from memory. We can describe it to a third grader from memory. But anything that is using our memory to answer those questions is going to support our learning, support our exam performance in the future.